Hello and welcome to Good Evening Britain, a Force for Good's weekly show coming to you live from our studios here in the heart of the great British city of Glasgow, with me, your host, Alistair McConnachie. We're broadcasting on all our digital platforms throughout the United Kingdom and across the world. We're bringing you quality, pro-UK comment and analysis every Wednesday from 7 until 8 p.m. on YouTube, on Facebook, on Twitter, and folks on TikTok. Please do send in your greetings. Please send in your comments. Please send in your questions for this, the first of our shows in 2024. We are teleprompter free, and this is the show for everybody who is British, who likes the British, who'd like to be British, who's thinking about becoming British perhaps, and also for those who love the United Kingdom and who want us all to stay together. This is the show for you folks. If you're watching on YouTube, please give us a thumbs up, because that's the main way that YouTube knows that we're broadcasting and sends out the message to its algorithms to tune in to the best show on keeping the United Kingdom together. That's broadcasting in the world at this moment. If you're on Facebook, please give us a like and please give us a share, folks, because that's the way that we help to that way that you help us to reach out to all the people out there who have not yet heard about us. And that's a lot of people, because it's a big old world out there and they do need to hear the positive message that we've got for the people of the United Kingdom and, in a larger sense, the world also. So pleased to be here. The team wishes everybody a happy and a prosperous, a peaceful and a successful, and most of all, a very British 2024. It will be the year when the Union will further strengthen itself for the weeks and the months and the years ahead, the centuries ahead of being a United Kingdom. So folks, I think you get the message. We're very much for keeping the UK together. If that's you, please do help to get our message out there. Please do help to share. Got a lot to talk about tonight. Very interesting programme coming up. We're going to be slating the SNP as always. We are going to be talking about an interesting development in the field of British remembrance. And we've also got a Busting Indy Myths Part 29. Part 29 is coming up as well. Somebody says Lowland Scots are Saxons and Highland Scots are from Ireland. I don't know about that. I probably wouldn't go along with that particular analysis, really. But then again, I'm not really clear on the particularities of each part of Scotland and where they came from, to the extent that even matters anymore. So, Mr. says you would make a good Doctor Who. Oh, thank you very much. That's an interesting one. I would like to be approached by the BBC to be the next Doctor Who, and in fact, this year I may have to be looking for that sort of work. So, who knows? I'll hold out hope. Send it in anyway. Mark Edward Moore says the SNP are straight up communists. They're certainly straight up idiots half the time. Okay, so let's talking about idiots, right? And let's talk about the MSPs for a little bit. And I bought a newspaper the other day, which is not something I've done these too recently, but I had to I had to buy one because I needed to break a tenner, actually, was the reason. So I bought a newspaper for 90 pence, the cheapest newspaper I could find, which was the I newspaper. So in order to get £9, 10 pence change. And I found this article here. That person in the middle is actually a Labour MSP called Monica Lennon. And I was shocked and appalled to discover that she is touring, literally it says touring schools ahead of launching a policy that she's got, which is some kind of retarded policy, which I'll get to in a minute. But the schools that she's touring to tell about her policy are primary schools, right? So this woman is Labour MSP, is touring primary schools to try to convince them about her case, her new policy, which apparently is to hold corporations responsible for the so-called environmental damage which they might commit, according to her, okay? Primary schools, right? And I thought to myself, has she absolutely no shame, okay? If a head teacher phoned me up and said, and I'm not an MSP or an MP, okay, but if a head teacher phoned me up and goes, Alistair, could you come in and talk to the P7s about the union? I would say no, okay? I'm not going to talk to little children about politics. If a head of a high school phoned me up and said, would you come in and talk about the union? I would say I'd only do it to the sixth formers. And even then, I'd really ideally want there to be somebody else there, given the opposite point of view, so that there could be a little bit of a debate. But I'm not just going to come in and talk to children about politics. That would be a complete abuse of power, in my view. Obviously not in her view. Okay, and that's not an SNP MSP who, I mean, I could understand an SNP MP or MSP doing it because they're just idiots. But that's like a Labour one that you're thinking, well, maybe she'll have a little bit more sense. But no, she doesn't. She's literally, and she's got the cheek to like sit there with these little children around her while she's mugging away for the media. Like, look at me talking to P7s about politics, about my politics. I think that's just absolutely disgraceful. And the policy, as I say, stop ecocide, by which they mean corporations that, in her opinion, are damaging the environment, which, of course, I presume is like oil companies and stuff like that. Anyway, I just wanted to get that off my chest and to segue into the next point about MSPs being stupid. On Monday, Hamza Yusuf had a meeting, or a what does he call it? A speech, a major speech at Glasgow University, who had the temerity to give him a room so that he could talk basically to the media. And he announced that if Scotland were independent, he would set up a ministry for industrial policy. Well, yeah. I mean, that's like saying, you know, if I flew to the moon, I might plant the Union Jack flag there. You know, it's not something that's going to happen. Certainly not in his lifetime or my lifetime. Anyway, what really irritated me about it was he was co-presenting this with the Greens, and the Scottish Greens environment spokesperson Mark Ruskell said that it was right that corporations are quote-unquote made to pay while fossil fuels are phased out. That's very similar, actually, to what that Labour MSP Monica Lennon was trying to tell the P7s at her event. Anyway, he then goes on to say, this is the Scottish Greens spokesman Mark Ruskell saying, quote, "We can ensure the oil and gas companies who have plundered the North Sea for generations are made to pay back to a society that has seen its environment decimated in the name of profit. So, this is the article. First Minister unveils plan for new ministry in major Indy speech. So I thought to myself, literally, how do you plunder the North Sea of gas? You could say you plunder a sea of fish, perhaps. You could plunder something that's a living thing, but you can't plunder what's actually below the ground. It just seemed like such an ignorant use of words. An absolutely insane statement. And I put that out on Twitter, and somebody came back and they said, agreeing with me, said, quote, "Will the renewable industry have to pay compensation for the wind and sun that they've plundered from Scottish air?" And the same person came back, another person came back and said, like, Mark Ruskell says that they have to pay back to a society, that the oil companies have to pay back to a society. That society was built on oil and gas, and that society continues to thrive on oil and gas and can't do without oil and gas. The society doesn't have to pay back. The companies don't have to pay back anything to society. The society is dependent upon oil and gas. Those companies, as this person says, kept us going, helped people pay their bills and educate their kids, and paid for a huge welfare bill too. So what that's saying is the SNP, having got hitched up with the Greens, I mean, it's funny from a Unionist perspective because the SNP is just making a complete fool of itself. But if it wants to be taken seriously, it really needs to drop the association with these absolute loonies in the Green Party. But hey, this will run its course. This will run its course. And at the end of the day, what's going to happen is that we will have been proved correct once more. In the meantime, we're all going to suffer hugely high bills for our heating and for our cooking and so on, because oil and gas is by far, if it's properly resourced, the cheapest kind of fuel that we've got at the moment. And I'm afraid the Mark Ruskells of this world and the Humza Yousafs of this world are in the wrong direction. They're going in the wrong direction. And they're doing it on the basis of this climate change religion, essentially, which is a complete bunkum, complete nonsense, and which isn't even a real thing. And even the idea that fossil fuels are going extinct is nonsense as well. I've been watching a lot of TikTok videos, which some of them are fascinating. Some people on TikTok saying that, in fact, fossil fuel is something that the earth itself constantly generates. Very interesting theory. I don't know if that's right or wrong, but I'm more likely to believe that than I am that fossil fuels are somehow going to be the death of us, when in fact we look around and everything that we have, including this webcam that I'm looking at, is made from oil. Anyway, that's just a wee rant there about that, because I see these people having power, and like if I was sitting in that room at Glasgow University, I could not stop myself just shouting out. I couldn't stop myself just shouting out like, "What a load of rubbish! What a load of rubbish!" Why don't people do that more often? And these politicians will change their tune. You have to just laugh them out of court, or if that's the expression, laugh them out of the stage, laugh them off the stage, and don't listen to them. Patrick Harvey once said the oil industry must die, says Adam. Yes, I'm absolutely sure he would say something like that. Nicholas says they'll have a ministry of funny walks next. Well, they certainly have a ministry of funnily falling off your scooter while racing down the hall in a mad rush. And the current minister of that is, of course, also the First Minister, Humza Yousaf. Christopher says the SNP are complete propagandists. Looks like Miss Lennon is taking her lead off them. She absolutely is. Well, there's a good point. Nicholas says they are grooming children and the teachers are allowing it. Yes, the schools are politically grooming children. They're also grooming children in a very unfortunate sexual way, as we know, with all their crazy things that they concentrate on these days at school, which they never spoke about when I was at school, except for like 1 hour in guidance class in 6 years. Scotland says a newspaper is now 90 pence. Well, that's the cheapest. If you want to buy, like, the Telegraph is £3 a day. The Sunday Telegraph's £4 a day. I saw that yesterday and a couple of days ago. £4 for a newspaper. You take out a second mortgage for that. Print media can't survive, I don't think, to be frank with you. Christopher says, none of these people have any idea about business and energy. Humza should go back to his call centre job. He'd be more effective and more useful as well. Stuart says the SNP will be the death of us. Well, yeah. What's upsetting, of course, and I don't want to blackpill anybody, but the Labour Party agree with the SNP on basically all of this nonsense, this climate change stuff, the grooming of children stuff. You know, it's not like we have a whole lot of choice here in Scotland, or indeed throughout the United Kingdom. So what is to be done? Well, democratically, we have to hope that this general election coming up will see a change in power in Scotland, in the sense that the SNP will lose seats. They may still remain the biggest party, but they'll lose seats. That may cause a falling out among them. That may cause them to start to question the Green Coalition alliance. Humza, or whoever replaces him, is probably going to be keen to keep that coalition going. That may lead to people within the SNP leaving the SNP and joining ALBA, or it may lead to splits in other ways. But the point is, it's going to create internal tension within the SNP, and that's going to reduce their effectiveness. And then there'll be the 2026 election, the Scottish election in 2026, and that may then see the SNP lose out further. And we have to hope that in time, the ideologies, that the crazy ideologies that we're faced with at the moment, the climate change nonsense, all the obsessive sexuality stuff that the politicians are concentrating on, hopefully all of that will start to take a back seat and will start to move out, and we'll go back to where it was, which was basically the domain of the crazies who don't get to play with the big boys anymore. Emma says take children out of schools and homeschool them. I think that's a good idea, but it's not everybody that's able to do that, of course, and not everybody is capable of homeschooling either. So I think if you can, I think that is a good idea. The Labour Party will say anything and everything for votes, says Catherine. Absolutely, they will. So, crikey, we're at the bottom of the hour already. That went fast. Folks, I'm just going to do On This Day in British History right now. On this day, 10th of January in 1863, the Metropolitan Railway Corporation opened the world's first underground railway. And it was built between what's now called Paddington, which was called Bishop's Road back then, and Farringdon Street. And it would grow, and it would become known as the London Underground, or as I like to call it, the eighth wonder of the world, which transports, so we're told, around 5 million people each day. That seems like an awful lot, but if you've ever been in one of these trains at rush hour, it certainly does feel like 5 million, I can assure you of that. Haven't been in it though for several years. Anyway, so that line was the first underground line of the London Underground, and we know it today as the Metropolitan Line because it was created by the Metropolitan Railway Corporation. And Baker Street is one of the original stations on the Metropolitan Line, and you can see that photograph there of the Metropolitan Line back in the late 1800s, and below it is the same place today. So you can see that it's absolutely identical, other than the fact that I think the platforms are maybe a little wider today. Well, they're definitely a little wider. And I tell you something about Baker Street. I was there, maybe 3 or 4 years ago, and I just walked into it, and they've got parts of that beautifully lit in such a way that you suddenly think you're walking into something from the 1800s. And they play it up and they maintain it in a really atmospheric way to reflect its heritage. And you can get a hint of that from the bottom photograph there with the old-fashioned light bulbs. And it's really, really well done. Really beautiful. A really beautiful station. Check it out. That's Baker Street. And of course they play up to that because it's the whole Sherlock Holmes thing going on and so on. Okay. So that was on this day, the Metropolitan Railway created the Metropolitan Line, as it's now known, back in 1863, the world's first underground railway, and a great thing that we've got there. A great piece of British heritage is the underground. I used to know somebody who worked on the underground, and he told me that the reason why they can't run the underground 24 hours a day is because they need to do so many repairs and clearing out flooding and all sorts of stuff like that during the night, during those hours between late and early morning. And so it's not possible to run it 24 hours a day. Although some people say, why can't you? It's because they need to do all these crucial repairs on it. The sweeping arch still does look modern, doesn't it? Incredible what they could do back in those days. What I'm going to do now is Busting Indy Myths, our long-running series, Busting Indy Myths. Let's address that. Okay. Let me bring up the Busting Indy Myths banner. There we go. Busting Indy Myths Part 29. And in this Busting Indy Myths, we are going to look at the oft-heard myth that if Scotland were already independent, if Scotland were already separate, then it would never want to join the Union. It would never want to create a united kingdom. And the Scottish nationalists say this as if they've thought up like a really clever thing that you can't gainsay, that you can't disagree with. When in fact, on the contrary, this point helps us to articulate the value of what we have today. And what we would say to them is that if Scotland were already separate, it would definitely create a new United Kingdom. It would definitely come together with England and Wales and Northern Ireland, and it would definitely form one big country. It would definitely do that, and it would do that for all the reasons that the Union is a good thing to stay part of right now. And those things are economically, to pool and share our resources to help our closest neighbours in their time of need, and to be helped by them when we are in need. Socially, to be British, which is to say to be part of the wider community of these islands and to enjoy the benefits which come from that shared identity. And you know, we always say Scottish nationalists want to narrow our identity down to Scottish only, whereas as part of the United Kingdom, we can have a even bigger identity because we can be Scottish and British. We can have that dual identity. And we're definitely about encouraging people to expand their sense of identity in that way. And culturally, to enjoy the precious birthright which we all enjoy, the rich cultural inheritance which naturally belongs to everyone who identifies with all parts of these islands, wherever we may live in them, and regardless of where in the UK that value comes to you from. So when you identify as part of the United Kingdom, then you can enjoy the cultural inheritance that comes from England. And in England, you can enjoy the cultural inheritance that comes from Scotland. If you're in Northern Ireland, you can enjoy the cultural inheritance that comes from Scotland, England and Wales, and vice versa, and so on, for every part of the United Kingdom. So economically, socially and culturally, it makes sense. So basically, if Scotland were separate, we would want to rejoin, or we would want to join in the first place, the Union for all the benefits of association which come from being in Union. We would want to create a United Kingdom for all the reasons that the United Kingdom is a good thing right now. So that's an easy point to address. And it's also worth noting that the sort of Scottish nationalist who will ask, why would Scotland ever want to join a British Union, is usually the same Scottish nationalist who will be falling over himself to join the European Union. And there seems quite a lot of them for some strange reason. They love the they love the EU, it seems, more than they love the UK. And that really doesn't make any sense. You know, we actually spoke about that in our book, One Big Country, where we said, many Scottish nationalists love the EU more than they love the rest of the UK. They want to throw away our centuries-old union and turn their backs not only on the rest of the UK, which is Scotland's biggest trading area, but on the very people who are often their closest family. And for what? It is especially ridiculous because the United Kingdom represents the very thing that the European Union aspires to be. Think about it. And what we did was we quoted an excerpt from an article which describes how the political benefits which we have in the UK and which have been built up over centuries is what the EU themselves would love to have, if only it could. For example, the article that we quoted from says this: here are some essential ingredients for a successful sovereign multinational union: an effective single currency covering a highly integrated economic area, along with fiscal, by which is meant tax, risk sharing and wealth redistribution across that area, such as the Barnett Formula, a comprehensive single market in goods and services is also a key requirement. Then you need a single risk-free sovereign debt market, a banking union, a united foreign security and defence policy, deep cultural and family ties, shared values, unlimited, uncontentious free movement of people within that area, representative institutions with real power and usually popular legitimacy, a shared head of state and similar legal traditions, and a shared mother tongue is useful too. And all of these things we have in the UK. All of these things we already enjoy politically. The UK provides all of these things for Scotland, ready-made, but still the SNP and Greens want to break away from those things and join an EU which has precious few of those things, if any. So the fact is, if Scotland were already separate, we would want to recreate a united kingdom for all the political benefits of association which come from being in union. Folks, thus ends Busting Indy Myths, part 29. Good, okay, well let's get rid of that banner and let's check up. Susie says, our separate nations are like sticks which are easily broken. Bundled together, we are unbreakable. Christopher says the same things apply as in 1707. Talking about 1707. Yeah, talking about 1707. I was in the Mitchell Library last week because I needed to find an important article in an old magazine, an old journal about the Union of 1707, because we're building up our knowledge about it here. And I was able to find the article, and I needed to find another article from another journal. And the lady said that it was in the basement and they couldn't access the basement that this journal was in, and they haven't been able to access this whole area of the Mitchell Library for what seemed like months, and she had no idea when they were going to be able to access it again. And this, if I got it right, it was like there was flooding in it as well. And I spoke to somebody shortly after, and he said to me he thinks it's because the Mitchell Library is built very close down to the train line at Charing Cross Station, and there's flooding there, and there's also work being done there, and there's issues with the walls of the station area and the basement of the Mitchell Library and all that sort of stuff. Anyway, I'm sure they'll get it sorted out eventually, but how am I going to get that article from Scottish Affairs, the journal which I needed to get? So that's irritating. Anyway, that was just a little diversion. Thank you, Christopher. Says, and another Indy myth well busted. TC says, with a Scottish father and an English mother, I embrace my Britishness and the union of the crowns. Susie Davis says, I'm the happy recipient of the One Big Country book. We're getting that as a screenshot. Folks, you'll find the link up there in the thread, but all you need to do is to go to amazon.co.uk and search for One Big Country, and it will come straight up there. And it's also available on ebook as well for a lesser price, but it's very cheap. Even the paperback's $9.99, and you're not going to get cheaper than that for a quality paperback like this. Now, something that I wanted just to raise was some good news about back in 2020, if you cast your mind back to that unusual year, there was a BLM demo in St. Andrew's Square, which is the big square opposite Charlotte Square at the end of George Street, and there's a massive monument there, a massive pillar to Henry Dundas, who was a great Scotsman and a great Briton and a great British parliamentarian. And he was definitely a slavery abolitionist, although the BLM people tried to twist his legacy and suggest that he was responsible for slavery being extended, when in fact what he was trying to do was to get it he was trying to get through his policy to abolish it through the House of Lords, but it was the House of Lords that kept preventing him from doing that. But there's no doubt, for those of us who are concerned about the truth, that he was an abolitionist. Anyway, the BLM people there came along. Not very many of them, to be frank. It was hardly more than 100. Came along to basically dump on his memory, and so we had about 40 people there to uphold his memory and his honour, as it were. And I give 3 speeches on that day, and one of them is called the Dundas Declaration, and it's on our website, and we'll put the link up in the threads. And during the Dundas Declaration that I made, I called for a monument in Scotland to commemorate the sailors of the Royal Navy who fought to free the slaves. And this is what I said word for word. I was addressing the protesters across from us, and I said, "We ask the reasonable protesters here today to support a force for goods idea, which is to establish a monument in Scotland to commemorate and esteem the sailors of the British Royal Navy who, from 1807 to the end of the 19th century, sacrificed their lives as they patrolled the high seas to stop the practice of slavery." I went on. According to historian Anthony Sullivan in his book Britain's War Against the Slave Trade, the operations of the Royal Navy's West African Squadron, 1807 to 1867. According to that book, more than 1,500 Royal Navy sailors died of disease or were killed in action, and they captured 1,600 slave ships and freed 150,000 Africans. Today, we should have a way to remember the sailors of the British Royal Navy who patrolled the oceans and who fought and died to stop the practice of slavery. That is a positive goal to which a Force for Good will continue to campaign, and so why not join us in that constructive goal? Well, I was being quite optimistic there with my last sentence, no doubt, but the message would get through to those who had ears to listen. And lo and behold, this week we learned that there is going to be such a monument in not Scotland but in Portsmouth, which was and is a big centre of the Royal Navy. And we've got an article here that appeared in the Daily Mail on Saturday. "Let's build a memorial to Navy's slave trade busters," says Commons leader Penny Mordaunt, who warns truth is in danger of being lost forever. And that points out that there is a plan to build one in Portsmouth, and she writes an article there, "Why we must not allow our history to be rewritten." And so that's fantastic news, I have to say. And they're trying to they want it to be by public subscription, which is to say by people who simply want to donate to it. And so they've got a crowdfunder running at justgiving.com/crowdfunding/ West African Squadron. And they need to raise 70,000. Okay. And I notice that a philanthropist person has committed to put up 25,000 as well. Here we go. That's Lord Ashcroft pledges 25k for memorial to Navy slave trade busters. So with his 25k, and I think there's 13,000 already up there, they're certainly halfway to their goal. And so I would like to think that our idea, which we had never heard of before, which to our knowledge nobody had ever promoted before, until we promoted it back on the 20th of June 2020 publicly and advertised it ever since. We would like to think that we've had some sort of role in encouraging this to happen. And so that's some good news. And of course that's in Portsmouth, and the more monuments, the merrier. The more memorials, the merrier. And let's get one in Scotland as well, and let's keep campaigning for this, because that's a good way to push back against those who simply want to dump on our history. And it's a good way, memorials are always a good way as well of raising an issue and getting people to say, well, what's that about then? And looking into it and keeping issues alive in the public consciousness. Whatever one may think about any particular statue or memorial, it's a great way into learning about the past. And then you can take that whatever way you want to take it, whether you like it or don't like it. So some good news there, some good news which we definitely wanted to highlight. Derek says, great show from the team, keep up our message. We'll do our best, Derek, we certainly will. Alan says the new sign at his monument in Edinburgh is disgusting. It is indeed completely ahistorical, complete nonsense. People are realising that though. There was a good article written last year in a historical journal just pointing out what nonsense that plaque is. Christopher says, Penny should definitely get a copy of the new book. Well, there's an idea. We are going to make sure that a range of people get a copy of the new book, people who can take it forward in some way by, for example, advertising it on their show and things like that. So we do have some YouTube influencers and personalities that will get copies too, in the hope that they can at least mention it or even get us in for an interview. That would be fantastic. We are indeed fighting a tide of ignorance and misinformation, and groups like A Force for Good we are at the vanguard, as it were, the truth vanguard. We're at the forefront of fighting that in our way. Alan likes Lord Ashcroft. He says he is a fantastic man for Britain. Among all he's done, he donated a copy of Britain's Treasure Islands to every school in the UK. It's a great book, full of great information. I didn't know that. Britain's Treasure Islands. I must look that up. He donated a copy of that to every school in the UK. Great. Well, thanks for bringing that to my attention, Alan. Okay, well, it's the top of the hour, folks. That's the first show of 2024. There'll be many more on their way. We're looking forward to this year. We're going to have lots of guests on, and some of these guests are going to be new people that we've never had on before. It's going to be a very enjoyable year. It's going to be a very interesting year. It's going to be a very exciting year. It's going to be a great year for the British Union. I can feel that in my bones. And politically, it's no doubt going to be a fascinating year. And so, we will be back next week. It just remains for me to say thank you, everybody, for your comments. Thank you for your questions. Thank you for your engagement. So, I'll see you next week, and it just remains to say God bless the United Kingdom, and God save the King. See you next time.